I made my videos on religion. Now it's time to talk about how people are organized when it's not by decree of God, but by just like regular people. Let's talk about governments. Hey! I interrupt this video to tell you about my book, Phantoms of the Inferno, an epic high fantasy with espionage, evil kings, mass extinction events, and shady magical conspiracies. If that sounds interesting, go read Phantoms of the Inferno on Scribblehub and Wattpad. Book 1 is up, and keep an eye out for announcements because Book 2 will start uploading later this year. So my government's videos are going to follow the same format as my religion videos. This video will be on different real-world governments, and my next writing video will be on making your own government. And we're going to start by establishing what a government even is. So a government is a system, machine, or group of people that have the power to organize people or resources. That sounds simple enough, and on a small scale it can be. On a big scale, it gets endlessly complicated and hard. So let's go over the real-world ways people have tried to make this work and have just made it somehow more complex and difficult. So we're going to start off this video with a quick crash course in the 3 big economic systems our world operates under. Because while socialism, capitalism, and communism aren't exactly governments, I was never taught in school that the Cold War was fought against democracy and dictatorship. I was told it was fought against communism, and understanding commerce will help you understand how your government works.
Need money.
So all 3 economic systems asks who has private ownership, that being the ability to control and own assets, that being ways to make money by private ownership or services or any other money-making streams, and how much the government controls the private ownership. Communism says there is no private ownership. The government controls all means of making money so it can be distributed equally regardless of how much you work. You make the same amount on the week you work 100 hours as you do on the week you're too sick to leave your bed. Socialism says there is some private ownership, but the government has enough control to say do this or don't do that, either with the money you make from your business or the business itself. So if you make money, some of it has to go to social services, like funding homeless shelters. Capitalism says there is full private ownership without government intervention. This means you can own a business and run it however you want to make as much money as possible.
Need money.
Now, if you live in the US like me, you probably think some aspects of communism and socialism sound familiar. And that's because we don't live in a true capitalism. We have aspects of socialism with social services like food stamps and social security. And we have aspects of communism with government reach stating what businesses can and can't do. The reason your mattress comes with a tag is because there are surprisingly strict regulations on mattress production the government enforces, and that's because a true capitalism or communism or socialism don't really work. Our current systems have their flaws, but the duct tape is still keeping them together. In a pure capitalism system, people sell anything. They sell arsenic as medicine, saying it will make you live forever, and there is no recourse when the people who take the arsenic die. In a communist system, there's no money, which is fine until you get into an accident that ruins your winter coat in January, and the government isn't slated to issue new coats until next October. And socialism says the government keeps things fair and helps the poor until people abuse the system or the government becomes corrupt. All 3 of these systems are prone to corruption. They can all be toppled, and so can governments. Now on with the video, starting with... Democracy is a form of government where the people pick whoever's in charge by voting for them. And there are 2 types of democracy, direct and representative. And here in America, we actually have both. On a federal nationwide level, we are a representative democracy. That means we vote not for the Electoral College, but our votes affect how the Electoral College votes, and it's their vote that decides who becomes president. That's why someone can lose the popular vote but still become president. As for the direct democracy, in America, we practice that on the small scale. Your vote gets directly counted when it comes to deciding who's the mayor of your town. There's no middleman. And democracy gets tricky in 2 ways. One is population. The reason representatives and the Electoral College exist is to help simplify a vote for one role in a country with a population of 300 million people. But we still get it very wrong in a lot of ways, because each state only gets a set number of votes. And to a degree, this is decided on population, but there is a cap. And it's also decided by senators, and each state only gets 2. California, a state with a population of almost 40 million people, has the same number of senators as Wyoming, a state with a population of 600,000 people.
I hate people.
The second way democracy gets tricky is when it comes to deciding who can and cannot vote. America might have a population of 300 million, but we do not have 300 million people who are allowed to vote. Some of those people are undocumented immigrants, some are children, some are felons, some simply don't have a car to get them to a voting booth. And mind you, I've been talking about presidential elections, but your world, or country, a fantasy world, will ideally have more than one country and more than one form of government. But the democratic countries of your world don't need a president. In our world, there are parliaments, councils, prime ministers, and a lot of other people you can elect into roles of government. So it's worth asking what is and isn't voted on in your world. How long are people elected into certain roles allowed to stay in them? Who can and cannot vote? And how do they vote? It's a lot to consider, but a voice in government has been the dream of countless people across history, and that's a compelling motive or message or plot point for your book. So this is sort of 2 forms of government in one. The overall idea of oligarchy and aristocracy is a specific group of people who are above the rest of the population should be in charge. But how they're chosen is where they differ. In oligarchy, I keep mispronouncing that.
It's fine! I'll yell louder!
In oligarchy, I will not be able to pronounce that again, operates under the power of a group of the super wealthy who maintain their power through their wealth. An aristocracy operates under the power of the most elite, the smartest or strongest or tallest, or whatever trait your world values most. The people who are top tier in that trait are the ones who get to be in charge. And these both offer fun things you can do with your world. What crazy traits could your world value that puts random people in charge? Does your character possess those traits or not? If not, how are they mistreated? If they do it's the oligarchy. It's throwing me off.
It's fine! I'll yell louder!
If they do possess those traits, do they use them to garner power, or do they hide them to try and avoid power and the responsibility that comes with it? Or is it less a trait you're passively have and something you have to prove? What competitions can you have to decide who's in charge? Are they feats of strength or intelligence? What happens to the losers? And this is just for aristocracy. If your world is an oligarchy, how does the ruling class maintain their power? How do they react to people encroaching on that power? Think, if the super rich rule your world, how do they act around someone who stumbles their way into new money? These are all great questions to help you breed drama amongst your characters, or just show how bleak your world can be. A theology is a form of government wholly centered around religion. In a theology, there's going to be one main religion that dictates state-sanctioned worship, and the person in charge will be someone who claims to be, or might actually be, divinely chosen by God. And this can breed all kinds of drama, because religion is so weird and complicated, and I've gone over that. So any rules your religion dictates are also laws being enforced on people. Praying isn't something you can opt out of. You have to do it as many times a day as the church dictates. They dictate your clothes, your birth, funerals, what you can and can't read, who you can and can't talk to, what you can and can't eat, and how you are punished if you commit a sin and break the law. Sometimes it will be public beatings, sometimes death, sometimes a slap on the wrist and being told to stay home if you can't behave properly.
Behave yourself.
Now, as dark as a theology can be, they can also be imposed because of empathy. Maybe the ruler of your country imposes a theology because loving their country, loving their citizens, mean they don't want anyone to be condemned to hell. So they impose sin as law as a way to try and save people. That's a very naive way to be in a very interesting worldview you can give a ruler. And it would be fun to challenge when they're forced to confront people who don't believe in their God, may have external forces forcing them to sin, or simply interpreted holy text in a slightly different way. My point is, there's a lot of fun you can have when you combine religion and government. Monarchy Monarchy is a sort of mix between theology and oligarchy. How monarchies actually started was in the early days of farming. Some people were better at farming than others. They ended up with excess, which they gave away in exchange for power over the people they gave their resources to. The story they tell is that they were given their power by God, and that's why they're king. Now, anymore, most monarchies aren't trying to sell the divine right of kings idea. There are more interesting people than King Charles for God to give power to, and that's fine, because England isn't an absolute monarchy. They are a constitutional monarchy, which means their rulers don't have any real power. They're a figurehead, while Parliament, who is elected, are the ones deciding what to do. An absolute monarchy means there is a king who has absolute control over their country, and that's all fine and good for a small, centralized group of people. But the bigger and more spread out the population gets, the more power will need to get delegated. What would an absolute monarchy look like in modern England?
King. I'm king.
Now, the big appeal to writing monarchies is just that it's fun history and world building, making a family lineage for the king. They're formed pretty organically, so no one's going to wonder how this monarchy happened, or this joker ended up in charge. And the power exchange is simple. The power traditionally went to the ruler's oldest son. In modern time, it goes to either oldest child. And because monarchies are so old, you can throw in all kinds of weird rules your king or queen have to follow. Plus, princesses. People like princesses. A dictatorship is similar in a lot of ways to the other governments I've talked about. There's one head guy who the people may have chosen, but now they don't get a say in whether or not the head guy stays in power. He's there now, and he's not necessarily a he, but symbolism imagery.
Some of you may die.
In a dictatorship or totalitarian government, military is key. The dictator is in charge and imposes his will through military force. Sometimes this will mean sending the military into civilian homes for seemingly inconsequential reasons, just to show off the power the head guy has. People are constantly being watched, censored, and their needs, not their rights. They don't have rights. Their needs are infringed on. In a dictatorship, a house with water, any house with any water, is not a given. It is something that was given by the dictator and can be just as easily taken away. It is a bleak existence that breeds resistance, but it also breeds a lot of poverty, bloodshed, and fear. If you're writing a dictatorship, you want to ask yourself how it became a dictatorship. Usually they come about because people are trying to overthrow a corrupt form of government, and they succeed in the execution, but fail in the follow-through, allowing more corrupt forces to take charge. You'll also want to ask yourself what your character's breaking point is. When did they throw their safety to the side in favor of resisting? What does resisting mean? Sometimes it's just as simple as sitting in your home teaching your children to read. And if your characters overthrow a dictatorship, what does the follow-through look like? I haven't seen the new Star Wars, and I know Palpatine Has Returned was bad, but it was the right direction. You can't just blow up the Death Star because someone else, either someone in the Revolution who's power-hungry or someone in the old regime who's cunning enough, will take power and impose their will in a new yet identical dictatorship. Feudal government is how governments acted in the Middle Ages, the times of knights and princes and towers and dragons. And the reason feudalism is an idea planted in the past is because it only works in a highly agricultural society, which just doesn't exist anymore, at least not on a centralized, big enough scale for feudalism to have a tangible shape. Basically, feudalism is a pyramid-shaped caste system. At the top is the monarch who distributes land and resources to lords and the church in exchange for their money and support. The lords then took their land and resources and distributed it to knights in exchange for their protection and military service. And the knights distributed their land and resources to serfs and peasants who worked the land farming and obeying the decrees of their landlords. Serfs and peasants had no rights and no way to move up in the system because land was not bought or sold but distributed. This goes back to the form of economics. What economy does your country have? Does it allow for the lower tiers to get a leg up at all? Can people move down in the class system? What are the people willing to do or sacrifice to keep their rank? And most importantly, what does the means of production look like in your world? How is food grown? Who grows it? What kind of food is it? Food is the foundation that all governments are built on. No food, no government. Which leads me into my next point. Anarchy is when there is no government. This might mean there is no central government, and each city or town or state operates under their own independent system. Sometimes this will mean people have rallied against even the smallest form of government. The upside to this is no taxes, no laws, absolute control and freedom over your life. The downside to this is someone still has to figure out how the streets get paved, the trash gets taken out, the sick get cared for and taken to proper medical help. If you write a world without a government, are your people altruistic enough to band together and not just be decent to each other without police and laws, but kind enough to organize and agree to take the trash out? And that is the problem with anarchy. People are not usually altruistic enough to make them work. People get tired, they get sick, they start feuding with Phil from down the street, and I know it's my week to take out everyone's trash, but I'm not helping Phil. And then Phil retaliates, and then it turns into a whole thing. Anarchy is precarious, and it topples under the slightest strain. So in your world, how did it get put into place to begin with? What is the strain that topples it, and what form of government comes in to replace it?
King. I'm king.
And that's all I got. Government is hard, not because it's endlessly complicated like religion, but because it's so hard to keep the trains running on time. And in government, that is someone's job, and depending on what type of government you have, failing to keep the trains running could be a deliberate choice, it could be something that gets you punished with a fine or jail or death, or it could just be a normal part of life that people just have to put up with. No form of government can keep the trains running on time all the time. So just pick the one that sounds the most compelling and fun and will be the hardest for your characters to live in for peak drama, and roll with it. And don't forget to read and write. Religion is so weird and complicated, and I've gone over... Hi, pretties. Here's a